The white zone is for immediate.
Evening, folks. You're listening to WHAINT Radio. Welcome to the Holler, friend. I'm Jonah, your voice for the night. Wherever you're listening from tonight, I'm mighty glad you found your way here. Got yourself settled in? Good. Coffee's still warm over here. At least I think it is. Been sitting beside me long enough that it ought to have gone cold by now, but some things don't seem to change around this station. That's all right. Suppose I'm used to it. Now, before we get started, something happened tonight that's never happened before. We've got ourselves a caller. Well, sort of. See, the phone lines around here don't exactly work the way they're supposed to. Most nights they don't work at all. Sometimes they ring and nobody's there. Sometimes somebody's there, but I can't quite tell where they're calling from. Tonight, though, we've got a recorded message. A fella named Mike over in Wisconsin says he's been listening for a while. Mike, if you're out there tonight, I appreciate you taking the time. Let's hear what you got.
Jonah, my name's Mike. I'm calling from Wisconsin. First off, just want to say I'm a huge fan of the show. I never miss an episode. Just had one question I've been wondering about, though. How exactly did you find the tower? In any case, I'd love to hear that story someday. Thanks again, Jonah.
Well, Mac, first off, thank you kindly. It's a strange feeling knowing somebody all the way up in Wisconsin is spending part of their evenings listening to an old man ramble through a microphone. Never would have imagined that. As for your question, how I found this place. Truth is, I wasn't looking for it. Not really. I don't suppose a man ever goes looking for the holler. It was the other way around. It found me. This would have been, not long after Mary Ann passed. Some of you have heard me mention her before, my wife. Still feels funny saying those words out loud. You spend 30 years beside somebody, then one day they're gone, and the world keeps expecting you to keep moving like nothing happened. Folks mean well. They'd stop by with casseroles, invite me over, ask if I wanted company. After a while, they stopped asking, and I started making excuses before they even had the chance. Truth is, I didn't want company. I wanted quiet. Quiet enough that I could pretend she'd just stepped into the next room. I quit going into town unless I absolutely had to. Didn't fish much. Didn't sit on the porch. Didn't answer the telephone. I just stayed busy. Or at least I tried to. I'd always tinkered with radios since I was a young man. Old Philcos, Zeniths, Motorola's, anything folks brought by that crackled or buzzed or wouldn't hold a station. After Mary Ann, that became just about the only thing I did. People would leave broken radios on my porch. I'd fix them. Sometimes I wouldn't even charge them. Just liked having something that needed me. Something I could make whole again. Funny thing about old radios. You spend enough nights with your ear pressed close to static, you begin convincing yourself there's something hiding underneath it. Most nights, it's just electricity, atmospherics, distant stations bouncing off the clouds. But every now and then, you'll catch something. A word, a laugh, somebody calling another person's name. You tell yourself it came from somewhere else. Has to. Only one stormy night, I heard my own. Soft as somebody standing just outside the window. I looked up, thought maybe somebody had wandered onto the property. Nobody was there. Then it came again. Jonah. Closer this time, coming through the speaker. I remember reaching over, turning the volume down, and the voice stayed exactly the same. Didn't get quieter, didn't get louder, just stayed. Then it said, "I've been trying to reach you." Did you folks hear that? Well now, that's new. Sounds like I've got company up on the roof. Little footsteps. Too light for a person. Too heavy for a squirrel. I reckon I'd better go see what's making all that racket. Wouldn't sit right with me if I didn't. I'll tell you what, let's do this. I've got tonight's story ready to go, and I promise, at the end of tonight's broadcast, we'll take ourselves a gander. I'll grab a flashlight, see what's walking around up there. If it's nothing, you'll get a good laugh at my expense. If it isn't, well, I suppose we'll find that out together.
469.
Now, tonight's letter comes from a man named Samuel, 32 years old, lived down in Louisiana. Been hunting the same 200 acres since his dad first carried him into those woods when he was 14. He thought he knew every inch of that property, every deer trail, every turkey roost, every bend in the creek. Turns out, there was one place waiting for him that he'd somehow never seen before. An old slave cabin and an abandoned well right in the middle of the floor. Stay close, friends. You're listening to WHAINT, deep and dark in the Midnight Holler. Let's see where Samuel's trail takes us. See you on the other side.
Episode 8, The Old Well. A story for the Midnight Holler. I've hunted that piece of ground every spring since I was 14 years old. I'm 32 now. Do the math and you'll see it's most of my life. More years on that land than off of it, honestly. And I still can't tell you why I keep going back, except that some things get into your blood the way a fishhook gets into your thumb. You can pull it out, but it leaves a big hole either way. 200 acres, give or take. My Uncle Bill's land, up in the hill country past Clinton, where the bottom land gives up and the ground starts to roll. Loess Hills, they call it. Old wind-blown dirt stacked up over God knows how many thousand years. Cut through with ravines so deep and sudden you can walk right up on the lip of one before you know it's even there. You see beech trees, magnolia, oaks so old the limbs sweep the ground and root themselves up again. Whole colonnades of them, green-black and dripping moss, even in a dry summer. It's beautiful land, let me tell you. It's the kind of beautiful that makes your chest hurt a little bit, standing in it at first light with the fog still sitting low in the draws and the gobbler sounding off, half a mile out like the woods themselves are clearing their throat. Dad took me out there the first time in early April, the year I turned 14 years old. Dad was a no-nonsense type of guy. The kind of dad that taught you by making sure you were always aware and always listening, rather than just speaking the obvious to you. I remember one time at 13 years old, I heard him knocking at my door around 4 o'clock in the morning. "Hey boy, you up?" "Yes, sir." "You lie." "Yes, sir." And that's kind of how it was. Dad just expected certain things. I guess if he had a love language, it would be acts of service first. He wasn't much for words, or emotions for that matter. But he was a good man, and he raised me right. Raised me to be a better person than him, which I think is the job requirement that most parents would agree on. Dad took me out there to that land the first time in early April, the year I turned 14. Spring turkey season in Louisiana starts around then, first week of the month on private land, give or take, depending what part of the state you live in, and it runs about a month into early May. You can't use a rifle. You need to understand that because people who don't hunt turkey always picture some fella lying in the leaves with a deer rifle, and it ain't that at all. Turkey's a shotgun bird. Has to be. You're calling him in close, inside 40 yards most of the time, and you're putting a pattern of shot into the head and neck where the feathers won't stop it, and a bullet would just as likely blow the bird to nothing or go singing off through the woods a mile and take somebody's eye out that never even knew you were there. So that's why it's shotgun only. 10 gauge or smaller. Dad handed me his old Remington 870 Wingmaster that morning, a gun his own daddy had carried. 12 gauge, and it about knocked me on my rear the first time I touched off a load of number 5s through the full choke barrel. He laughed about that till he had to sit down on a stump. That gun's mine now, proudly. Has been for years. The bluing's worn to gray steel along the receiver where 3 generations of hands have carried it. And there's a nick in the stock I put there myself, falling off a four-wheeler when I was 16. And I wouldn't trade it for anything with a scope and synthetic stock and a price tag with 3 commas in it. Some things you just don't trade. That first year, Dad set me up against a big water oak 40 yards off a green field that Uncle Bill kept disked and planted in clover, and he worked a box call, low and soft, that raspy little 2-note yelp that sounds like nothing else in creation. And inside 20 minutes, we had a tom strutting broadside not 30 yards out, fanned up full, that bronze-green sheen of him catching the early sun like something poured out of a paint can. I shook so bad I'd like to have missed him clean. I didn't, though. I folded him right there in the clover. And Dad hollered and slapped my back so hard I about went down. And I remember kneeling there next to that old bird with my hands in the wet grass and thinking I have never in my life felt like this. 14 years old. It's a hell of a thing to give a boy, a feeling like that early. It ruins you a little, to be honest. Ruins you for anything smaller. We hunted that land together every April after that. Some of my fondest memories, if I'm honest. Just me and my dad. Sometimes early in the morning, we'd just park the truck up on the ridge and wait for daybreak, eating biscuits or breakfast or whatever while listening to the radio. I used to love those times, just the two of us. We'd walk in before first light with our headlamps off so we wouldn't spook roosted birds, feeling our way along the same deer trail that we had walked 100 times, listening to the woods wake up around us. Always owls first, then the first faint gray in the east and the whippoorwills going quiet, and somewhere out there in the black timber you could hear a gobbler cutting loose off the roost, that sound rolling out over the ravines like something ancient clearing its throat. And every single time, every year, it raced the hair clean off my arms. I didn't know yet how many of those Aprils I'd get with him. I guess nobody ever does. I think if I had known, I'd have tried to hold on to every single one of them a little tighter than I did. Though I suppose that's what everybody says after the fact. Uncle Bill's land? Man, it had history to it. Family land, technically. It came down through my dad's people, the Duceys. Though nobody in 3 generations have lived on it or worked it or anything but hunting, honestly. Before that, way back, it had been part of a bigger place, a plantation, or what passed for the tail end of one by the time my family got hold of a piece of it. Most of the original acreage got broken up and sold off after the war. The house burned sometime in the 1890s. Nothing left of the big place but a chimney standing alone in a stand of second-growth pine like a tombstone nobody bothered to knock down. My family's 200 acres was a back corner of that old property, timber and hollow and ravine. Never much good for row crops, which is probably why it stayed whole while everything around it got carved up into subdivisions and pine plantations over the years. I tell you all this because it matters to the story, because the land remembers things, or at least it felt that way to me. even before I had any reason to think so. I was 14 when I shot my first bird, but I was 16 the first time I found the cabin. It was late in the season, near the end of April, and I'd gotten separated from Dad chasing a bird that wouldn't commit. One of those henned-up toms that gobbles his full head off from 200 yards and then just walks off with his girls and leaves you sitting there feeling stupid. I was working my way back toward the truck along the bottom of a ravine I didn't recognize. Off the trail we usually walked, and then I came up on a little clearing choked with privet and young sweet gum. And sitting in the middle of it was a cabin. It was small. 1 room, maybe. Board and batten construction, gone gray and soft with rot. Roof caved in on one corner where a limb had come down through it years back. Kudzu running up one whole wall like it was trying to pull the thing back down into the ground. I stood there a minute just looking at it. There's something about finding an old structure out in the deep woods, someplace you had no idea a building ever stood, that does something to your stomach. Makes the whole woods feel less empty and more crowded somehow. Like you just found out you weren't as alone out there as you thought. And I should have turned around right then. I think about that a lot, actually. How easy it would have been just to turn around and walk back to the trail, to tell Dad I found an old hunting shack and let that be the whole story. But I was 16 and curious. The way 16-year-old boys are curious, which is to say, stupid about it. No sense of what curiosity might cost you. I went in through what used to be a doorway. Rotten boards under my feet, soft, giving a little with every step. Light came through the gaps in the roof in long dusty shafts, and dead leaves piled deep in the corners, and the whole place smelling of wet wood and mildew and something under that I couldn't place yet. There wasn't much inside. An old iron bed frame rusted to lace, broken glass, and rising up out of the middle of that dirt floor, right in the center of the one room like the builders had planned the whole cabin around it, was a well. I understood what it was before I even got close. The round curb of old brick, waist high, going soft and crumbled at the edges. A rotten timber cap laid across the top of it, and standing over it still, canted way off true but not yet fallen, was the skeleton of an old windlass frame. Iron wheel frozen solid with rust. A few threads of hemp rope hanging off of it that crumbled to powder when the wind so much as touched it. I had never seen a well built into the middle of a house before. I know now that it wasn't so strange as it seemed to me at 16. Folks used to build right up around a good water source when they could, save themselves the trouble of walking out in the weather to draw it, especially if the folks doing the walking weren't given any choice in the matter of where they lived or how far off they had to carry a bucket. I didn't understand any of that yet. I just knew it looked wrong, a well standing up out of a house floor like a mouth in the middle of a face. One whole corner of that timber cap had rotted through, boards gone soft and fallen partway in, leaving a gap maybe 2 feet across. And that smell? It came right out of that gap before I even got close enough to look down into it. You have to understand that I've smelled lots of dead things in my life. I've field dressed more deer than I can count. I've gutted hogs, found a dead cow bloated up in a ditch once that about made me sick from 30 yards off. This wasn't that exactly, though it was kin to it probably. It was thick, old and thick, like it had been building in that hole for longer than any one dead thing could account for. Layers of it, sweet and sour and wrong all at once, and it came up out of that dark opening and hit me in the face like a hand. I should have walked away right then. I didn't. I had a little mag light on my belt. Always carried one, still do. A habit Dad drilled into me since I was young. And I got down on my knees at the edge of that rotten gap and shined it down into the shaft. And there was a ladder, iron rungs driven straight into the brick wall of the well itself. Old maintenance rungs from whenever somebody last had to climb down and clean the thing out, going down further than my light could find bottom for a long 6 seconds. And then it found the bottom, and on the floor down there, in that little cone of yellow light, was bone. Not a bone, but bones. A floor of them, scattered and piled, some old and gray-white and half sunk into black muck on the floor. Some, and this part still visits me on some nights, some that looked less old than the rest. I didn't go down there. For years afterward, I wondered if I should have, if going down right then as a 16-year-old with a flashlight and no earthly idea what he was dealing with would have changed anything that came after. I don't really think it would have. I think some things you're not ready to know at 16, and the not knowing is its own kind of mercy, even when it doesn't feel like one at the time. I got up off my knees so fast I skinned them both on the busted timber. Then I walked back to the truck near running by the time I hit the trail, and I didn't say a word to Dad the whole ride home. Told Uncle Bill, though. Told him that same week, sitting on his back porch with a glass of sweet tea sweating a ring onto the arm of his chair, and I watched his face change while I talked. Watched him go still in a way I'd never seen a grown man go still. "You found the LaCroix cabin," he said when I was done, and I asked him what that meant. He was quiet a good while before he answered. Uncle Bill was not a man who told stories easy. He was a practical man, ran cattle on the rest of his acreage, didn't hold well with foolishness, and so when he finally started talking, I understood without him saying so that this was not foolishness to him. "That back corner of the property," he said, "used to be part of the LaCroix place. Big plantation way back, before your great-great-granddaddy's time even. House burned down in 1890-something. Nobody rightly knows how, and most of the land got sold off in pieces after that. That cabin's one of the old slave quarters, last one standing. There was a whole row of them once, and that's the only one that never got pulled down or burned along with the big house." He let that sit a second before he went on. "That well down there, it was already there and old by the time they built the quarters up around it. Dug by whoever worked that ground before the LaCroix family ever came to it. That's what I always heard, anyway. Though I couldn't tell you for certain. They just built a cabin up around the mouth of it so folks wouldn't have to walk out in the weather to draw water. After the war, when the road was falling in on itself, somebody boarded that well over instead of filling it in proper, the way you're supposed to. Nobody rightly knows why they didn't just fill it, and your great-great-uncle Emile went down into it back in 1926, and he didn't come back up." "Yeah, well, there's bones down there," I said. "A lot of them." He nodded slow, like that didn't surprise him at all. And honestly, that frightened me worse than anything he could have said after. "Family looked 2 days before they found that cap dragged back over the mouth of that well," he said. "From the inside, best anybody could tell, like somebody had pulled it shut after him instead of him falling and it closing on its own. They never did get his body out. Ground was too soft down there, or the smell was too bad, or I don't really rightly know what the real reason is, if I'm honest. It's one of those things that gets told differently every time somebody tells it. But after that, everybody just left it be. Boarded it over again, told the young ones to stay clear. And over the years, folk just quit going back to that corner of the woods at all. There's stories, if you want to hear them. Old folks used to say a riggaroo made a den down there in that well. You know what that is, boy?" I said I heard the word. Cajun boogeyman and all that. Something you scared little kids with. "It's older than that," Uncle Bill said, and he wasn't smiling when he said it. "Older than the plantation even, some say. That the LaCroix family built on ground even the Choctaw wouldn't touch, on account of something already living down in it, long before there was ever a well dug or a house raised over top of it. I don't know what's true or what's just talk. It's just had 100 years to grow teeth. All I know is my granddaddy told my daddy to stay off that corner, and my daddy told me the same. And I'm telling you that now, boy. You hunt the rest of that 200 acres all you want, but you stay off that LaCroix cabin, Samuel. You hear me, boy?" I told him I heard him. I meant it, too, at the time. It didn't stick. Nothing that scares you at 16 stays scared the same way it started out. By the time I was 17, the whole thing had gone soft and unreal in my memory. Folded up into just another strange story about the land. Something I'd tell around a fire if the mood struck. More legend than warning, really. I didn't go back to the cabin itself, but I kept hunting that ground, same as always. Same trails, same stands, same rhythm of April mornings. And it was somewhere in there, without my hardly noticing it happening, that the land itself started to change on me. The first strange thing was just a smell, and for a long while that's all it was, so it was easy to shrug off. You'd be sitting against a tree at first light, calling soft, waiting on a bird to work in, and all of a sudden the air would go thick with something rotten. Not a passing whiff, mind you, just the kind you get off a gut pile some other hunter left, but a wall of it. Sudden, like somebody had opened the door somewhere close by that led straight into a slaughterhouse. It would come and it would go. No wind pattern to it that I could ever work out. No logic. I'd catch Dad wrinkling his nose the same way, a stand or two over, and neither of us said much about it. I mean, what is there to say? Wood smell bad sometimes. Dead things rot in the underbrush all the time, and you don't always find the source. Then it was the sounds. Something moving in the tops of the trees. I know how this sounds, but you have to understand, I was raised in these woods, and I know what a squirrel sounds like up in a hickory. I know what a coon does. I know the particular crash a deer makes bailing out of a thicket. This wasn't any of that. It was heavy. That's the only word I've got for it. Heavy and slow, up high, limbs bending and popping under a weight that had no earthly business being up in a tree at all, moving along parallel to us sometimes for 100 yards or better before it would just stop. No animal moves like that. Nothing that lives in a Louisiana hardwood bottom gets that big and stays up in the canopy doing it. And I was 17 the first time I saw something in my crosshairs, and then didn't. That happened deer season, not turkey. General firearms season runs through November into December down here. And by then I had graduated up to Dad's old 30-06, a Remington 700 that had been my grandfather's before that. Good glass on it, and I was sitting on a ladder stand overlooking a little green field on the back side of the property. Maybe 300 yards as the crow flies from that cabin, though I didn't think about it at the time. Just before full dark, something came out of the tree line at the far edge of the field. I put the scope on it out of pure reflex, the way you do, and for 1/2 of 1 second, I had something in that crosshair that was tall in a way nothing in those woods should have been tall. It was upright. Wrong in the shoulders, head set too low and too long for anything I could put a name to. It had long ears, and just for a brief moment in time, it kind of looked like the face of a bat. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it wasn't there. Gone, between one blink and the next, like the dark had swallowed it whole. I sat in that stand a long time afterwards, heart going, telling myself it was a trick of the fading light. A buck standing funny. They do that sometimes. My own eyes playing tricks after a long cold sit. And I've told myself that story 100 times since, and I've never once believed it. The deer started disappearing around then too. Not missing shots. I mean, hit deer. Good hits. Deer that went down the way a mortally hit animal should. That we trailed with blood we could follow plain as a red string on the ground. Blood that just stopped. My dad always drilled that into me. Always said, a dying deer don't need to be rushed. And I was trained to wait about 20 to 30 minutes after I'd hit the deer, and then start tracking. But this was different. It wasn't thinned out the way a trail thins when an animal's slowing down and starting to clot. The blood just stopped. Like something had picked that deer clean up off the ground and carried it off without so much as a drag mark or a struggle print in the leaves. We lost 3 deer that way over 2 seasons. Good hits every time. And Dad started saying it was coyotes. Must be a big pack working the bottom, he said. And I let him say it because the alternative wasn't something either of us wanted to put words to yet. And then I was 18 when I finally had to. It was late in deer season. Cold for Louisiana. That thin gray cold that gets down in your bones worse than a hard freeze because it's damp all the way through. And I was in the same ladder stand, alone that morning. Dad home, he had a cold. A doe came out along the tree line just after good light, and I made what I thought was a clean shot, center of the shoulder. Then she humped up and bolted the way a hit deer does and went crashing off into the timber towards the black corner of the property, towards the ravine, towards the cabin, though I didn't let myself think that word yet. I gave her the usual half hour and climbed down and took up the blood trail, and it was a good trail at first. heavy red, easy to follow, the kind that tells you the animal's not going to go far. Then it started doing something I've never seen a blood trail do. It thinned too fast. Went from heavy splatter to fine drops to nothing at all inside maybe 80 yards. Way too quick for a hit that good. And the drops that were there looked wrong somehow. Smeared strange across the leaves like something had dragged through them sideways instead of the deer running through on its own 4 legs. The trail led me right down into that ravine, right up to the edge of that clearing, and there was the cabin. Looking exactly the same way it had 2 years before, except the kudzu had gotten thicker and one whole wall had started to lean. And I could hear something from inside. From down in the well, a wet working sound, tearing and snapping. The particular ugly music of something big eating something else that used to be alive. It carried right up out of that cabin into the cold morning air, and every hair on my body stood straight up. I had the good sense to turn around right then and walk away, but I didn't. I was 18 years old and half convinced I'd imagined every strange thing that had happened on that land for 2 years running. And some stubborn, stupid, prideful part of me needed to know. I needed to know. Needed proof one way or the other. I've asked myself since whether that's really what it was, that need for proof, or whether it was something in that land itself doing the asking, pulling me down that ravine the same way it must have pulled Uncle Emile 100 years before. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever know, to be honest. So I went in through the door, rifle up, off safety, which tells you something about how scared I really was, because I'm not a careless man with a gun, and I had that .30-06 shouldered and ready before I'd even cleared the threshold. The timber cap over the well had been shoved clean off its curb, half of it fallen down inside the shaft, splintered, more force than any 2 years of rot could account for on its own. That eating sound was louder now. It was close, right below the opening. I eased up to the edge of that well and I shined my light down. I saw it, maybe a second and a half. It was long enough. It was down at the bottom of the shaft, hunched over something dark and wet on the floor. And it turned its head up into my light the second the beam touched it, like I could feel it. Quick, too quick. The way an animal turns when it's been caught but isn't afraid of being caught. I've spent years since trying to find the right words for what I saw, and I still don't have them. The body of it was dog-shaped, kind of. Near enough, anyway. Too tall through the shoulder for anything that moved on all fours. Crouched there like I had just come up onto 2 legs and hadn't finished the motion. Matted dark fur gone patchy in places to show gray hide underneath. But the face wasn't any dog's face. It was pinched in narrow and wrong, hairless where the body was furred, skin dark and leather looking, nose flattened up into 2 black slits instead of a muzzle. And the ears stood up off that skull too big for it, too thin, membrane thin. The kind of ears you'd expect folded flat against something small and hanging upside down in a barn rafter, not standing up wide awake on something crouched at the bottom of a well, eating what used to be my dough. No wings on it. My mind went looking for wings the second I saw those ears and that face. Some part of me trying to make it make sense as one whole animal instead of 2 wrong animals stitched together. And I just didn't have any. Just that dog's body and that face and the eyes that weren't eyes so much as 2 flat yellow-green lights that threw my beam back at me with no fear in them at all. Just interruption. Just trespass. And I was the one who was trespassing. It made a sound. Not a growl, not a bark. Something lower than either one, coming up out of that ground itself as much as out of that throat. And it started to move. Towards the ladder, towards me. And I don't remember deciding to run. I remember being at the door of that cabin, and then I remember being 300 yards out and still running. Rifle still in my hand as though I'd never fired a shot. Branches whipping my face. And I did not stop running until I hit the truck. I remember holding back tears and my eyes watering as I sat in that truck with the doors locked and my whole body shaking so hard my teeth were going. And I didn't tell Dad the truth that day. I told him I lost the trail. Told him coyotes probably finished her off before I got there. He believed me, or maybe he let himself believe me. And I've wondered since if this was a kindness he did for me, or one he did for himself. I did not hunt that back corner again for a long, long time. Dad died the November I turned 20. An aneurysm, the doctor called it. Something that had likely been sitting quiet in him for years. A weak place in a blood vessel deep in his brain that finally gave way while he was sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee on an ordinary Tuesday morning. No warning at all. No chance for anybody to do a single thing about it. He was 51 years old. I was in the next room. I heard the cup hit the floor before I heard him hit it. And by the time I got to him, he was already gone somewhere I couldn't follow. Though his heart kept working another few minutes like it hadn't gotten the news yet. I can't even describe what that did to me. Some things don't need describing. Or maybe they can't be, not really. Not in a way that does the thing justice. I'll just say that for a long while after, I didn't think about the woods at all. Didn't think about turkeys or rifles or ravines or anything with teeth in it that wasn't grief itself, which has plenty. We buried him on a Saturday, and in the weeks after, going through his things the way a family has to, most everything of his came to me. His guns, both of them, the 870 and the old 30-06, which I already carried most seasons anyway, but which felt different in my hands afterwards. Heavier in a way that had nothing to do with the steel. His boots, his calls, a case knife he had carried 30 years with the bone handle worn smooth as river glass. Uncle Bill helped me go through the house, and between the two of us we accounted for near everything Dad owned, right down to the ball caps in his truck, except the watch. See, Dad wore a gold pocket watch every single Sunday of his life that I ever knew him. Church and family dinners both. An old wind-up thing that had been his own father's before him. 3 generations of Doucet hands winding that same stem. Same as 3 generations had carried that same shotgun. He had a collection of other watches that he kept and always showed off to me or family members. And that old pocket watch seemed very out of place. It's not like anybody else was carrying around a pocket watch, but for him, it carried a lot of sentimental value. He kept it in the top drawer of that dresser the rest of the week, wrapped up in a handkerchief, and I couldn't tell you the last time I actually saw him wear it, only that it was always there when I looked. A fixed point, the way certain things are fixed points in a family, whether you think about them or not. And after he died, it wasn't in that drawer. It wasn't anywhere in the house. We turned the house upside down over 2 weekends, Uncle Bill and my mother and me. Looked in every coat pocket and shoebox and coffee can a family accumulates over a lifetime. And that watch simply vanished. No explanation anybody could offer. And after a while, we just quit looking. It was painful to keep circling. One more hole in a season already full of them. I wish that was the moment I decided, once and for all, whether I'd keep hunting that land or walk away from it clean. It felt that big at the time. 20 years old, my dad in the ground, a monster or ghost or God knows what living in a hole 300 yards off the field where he taught me to call my first bird. And I remember sitting on my own back porch some night, that winter, turning the whole question over, whether the tradition was even mine to keep now that the man who'd given it to me was gone, whether going back out there every April was going to be an honor to him or just an old wound I kept picking at on purpose. But I went back that next spring anyway. Of course I did. Front field only. Same water oak. I told myself it was for him, for Dad. And I believe that's mostly true. But I also think there was some other thread pulling at me too. Quieter. One I couldn't yet call or name. The dream started maybe a year after we buried him. I'm going to tell it to you straight because I've turned it over so many times since that I don't really trust my own memory of it when it began. Only that it did, and that it didn't stop. Same dream, more or less, over and over. Close enough to the same that I got to where I recognized it was starting, even while I was still inside of it, the way you sometimes can with dreams. I'd be back down there in that ravine, dark, no flashlight, and I'd be standing at the mouth of that well looking down, and there'd be a light down there. Not my light, but some other light, low and small and gold-colored, like a coal caught the exact color of a wedding ring, or a watch case catching lamplight across a Sunday dinner table. And I'd know, the way you know things in dreams without anybody telling you, that if I just looked a little longer, went down there one more rung, I'd finally understand what it was, what it wanted, why it was down there at all. Some nights it felt like the thing with the bat's face was down there waiting on me. The other nights, on worse nights, it felt like it was Dad. I never got the answer. I always woke up right at the edge of it, heart slamming, sheets soaked through, and I'd lay there in the dark of my own bedroom, feeling that same cold pull in my chest that I used to feel standing at the edge of the ravine as a boy, except now there was a new ache stitched to it, a grief-shaped ache, because some nights I woke up not scared so much as robbed, like I'd been that close to seeing him again, seeing my dad again, in whatever crooked way a dream lets you see somebody, and the dream had snatched it back the last second, same as death already had. Let me tell you, 3 years of that will wear a hole in a man. It wasn't some brave, clear-eyed decision that led me to go back and face it down there. That's not the honest truth. The truth is closer to this. I just got tired. I got tired of the dreams, tired of the not knowing eating at the back of my mind every single day. Tired of feeling like a coward every April when I hunted that front field and felt that ravine sitting back there behind me like an accusation. And tired, most of all, of carrying a grief that had gone and tangled itself up with a monster until I could hardly separate the two anymore. I was 23 years old, and I'd started feeling like the thing living down there had well taken something from me, and that running away from it hadn't given it back. My nerve, maybe, my sense of the land as mine, as safe, as ours. And under all of it, quiet, half-shamed, a thought I could barely let myself finish. That maybe, somehow, some way, that made no earthly sense at all, I might find something else down there too. I decided I was going to go back and see it through, whatever seeing it through meant, because I did not think I could live the rest of my life the way I'd been living the last 3 years of it. I told Uncle Bill some of it, sitting on that same back porch, older now, more gray in his hair than I remembered, and he tried hard to talk me out of it, saying, "Samuel, some doors you don't open twice." And I heard him, I did. But I'd made up my mind past the point where hearing him could change anything. He didn't stop me. He couldn't. I think by then he understood that some things call to a person in a way that outrunning them just makes it worse. And maybe he could understand it better than I did, given what had happened to his own great-uncle. So I went in early May, past the end of turkey season, on a Friday evening. And I did it, carefully, the way you'd plan any hunt you meant to survive. I set up camp about half a mile off, up on a ridge with a clear sight line back towards the ravine. Tent and a cooler and my truck parked where I could get to it fast if I needed to. I brought the .870, Dad's gun, mine now, loaded with buckshot instead of turkey loads, because whatever I might find down in that hole, I wanted something that could do more damage close in the dark, in a tight space, more than I wanted range and precision. I brought a good flashlight, a streamlight, bright as a headliner near about, with fresh batteries and 2 spares in my vest. I also brought a knife I trust. I did not bring anybody's blessing, because I never fully asked for it, and I have thought since that maybe this was its own kind of cowardice, not wanting to hear the word no out loud from somebody I loved. I waited till full dark to walk in. I don't fully know why. Some instinct told me the daylight version of the cabin wasn't the true one, that whatever lived down in that well kept different hours than I did, than anybody did. And if I was going to face it, I wanted to face it on ground I had chosen, at a time I had chosen, not stumble into it carelessly the way I had at 18. So I walked in slow, light off most of the way, moon just bright enough through the canopy to pick out the trail. And every sound in those woods that night seemed turned up loud, every leaf, every twig, my own breathing going ragged in my chest before I'd even covered half the distance. The cabin looked the same. Worse, maybe. That leaning wall had gone all the way over, lying half collapsed across what used to be the doorway, so I had to climb through a gap where the boards had rotted through. And inside, the timber cap over the well had been shoved half off its curb, same as I remembered from 5 years back, only rotted through further now, one whole corner fallen in on itself. And then the smell. The smell came up out of it thick as ever, thicker, like the years hadn't done a thing to age it, like whatever was making that smell was still being fresh down there on some kind of schedule I didn't want to think too hard about. I got the rest of that cap dragged aside and I shined my light down into the shaft. Something about it looked wrong in a way I couldn't put a name to right off. Too deep, the brick curb giving way further down into raw earth, then to something that wasn't brick or earth either. The texture my light couldn't quite settle on, like the shaft had been widened and worked on by hands or claws or something else entirely, long after whoever dug that well originally had any say in the matter. It went down further than any hand-dug well built for one plantation family's water had any natural right to do so. I went down slow, the iron rungs cold enough through my gloves to sting. The flashlight held in my teeth the last few rungs, and when my boots hit bottom, I felt bone give under them. That particular crunch and shift you never forget once you felt it. And I nearly turned right back up around and climbed straight back up. And I nearly turned right back around and climbed straight back up. But I didn't. I made myself stand there for a full minute, taking deep breaths, light sweeping slow across what I'd finally come down to see, making myself look at it instead of running from it the way I had every time before. It wasn't a room at the bottom of that well. I didn't expect that. I hadn't let myself even imagine in 3 years of dreaming about it. It was a corridor, long, low walls of earth, shored up here and there with what looked like old timber, running back down farther than my light could throw. And there was exactly one way to go because the shaft I'd come down was the only opening I could find in that whole curved ceiling. And the walls. God, the walls. Bones piled along both sides in long, uneven ridges, stacked and packed and grown together with mud and time, into something that looked less like a random scatter and more like it had been built that way on purpose. It looked ancient, a wall made of what used to be animals, deer skulls, dozens of them, some still holding the ghost shape of an antler, hog jaws, the long curve of what might used to have been a cattle rib, I guess. It mixed in, because I made myself look close. I had to make myself do it. Mixed in there were bones that weren't animal at all. A hand, curled up small in the fold of the earth wall, like it was still reaching for something. Ribs too narrow and too fine to be a deer's. And near the middle of that corridor, half sunk into the packed dirt floor, a single long bone I am nearly certain was a femur, human-sized, going the color of old ivory, worn smooth in a way that told me it had been lying there, taking that particular polish for a long, long time. Some of it was old, century old maybe, gone gray and dry and fragile looking the way Uncle Emil's bones would have gone by now. And some of it, God help me, some of it was not old at all. Fresher pieces, darker, some with tissue still clinging in places the corridor's damp hadn't finished with yet. A smell coming off those newer piles that was sharp enough to make my eyes water, even through the general rot stench that filled the whole place. There was something else down there that caught my light and held it. A glint. A small, maybe 30 yards down that corridor. A glint, small, maybe 30 yards down that corridor, low against the base of the bone wall on the far side, catching my beam and throwing a spark of gold back at me that didn't belong in that dark hall at all. It was round, small enough to close a fist around. And even from 30 yards, even with my heart already slamming and every animal instinct in me screaming to leave, some other older part of me recognized the shape of it before my mind had caught up enough to argue. It looked like a watch, a gold pocket watch. The chain of it pulled in the dirt beside it, catching the light in a thin, bright line. I've asked myself 1,000 times whether it really was his watch, whether it could have been by any reckoning that makes sense in the daylight world. How a watch that went missing out of a dresser drawer in a house 11 miles from that ravine could have ended up down in a bone corridor under a 100-year-old well. I don't have an answer for that satisfies me. I only know what happened, which is that the second I let myself believe, even a little bit, that it might be my dad's watch. Every ounce of good sense I'd walked in there with went straight out of my head. I don't remember deciding to set that shotgun down against the earth wall. I just remember my hand doing it, gentle and careful, like I was setting down something breakable instead of the one thing that stood between me and whatever lived in that hole. And I remember starting towards that glint of gold with my light fixed on it, and my chest so tight I could barely draw breath around the shape of my father's name. I was maybe 10 steps down that corridor, gun behind me, light fixed on that glimmer, when I heard the board shift above me at the top of the shaft. Heavy. Something coming in through the gap in that leaning wall the same way I had. There is no door frame left in that cabin, not really. Just that leaning wall and the gap I'd climbed through. But I heard it anyway, plain as anything. A groan of old wood shifting, a weight coming down on rotten boards. Footsteps, if you can call them that. Too heavy and too even to be anything human walking careful. My whole body went to ice. I clicked the flashlight off before I'd even finished the thought to do it. Some instinctive part of my brain taking over faster than the rest of me could keep up with. And I stood there in that dark, so complete that it had texture to it. A pressure, my back against a wall of 100 years of bone, 10 steps away from my shotgun, a gold watch I couldn't see anymore, somewhere off in the black to my right, listening to something huge cross the floor above my head and towards the mouth of that well. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. I have never in my life ever been that still. I didn't know a body could go that still and keep functioning. Heart still going, lungs still working. But everything else locked down so hard it felt like my joints had rusted shut. I heard that thing stop right at the shaft. I heard a long, slow inhale, deep and wet. The kind of sound a bear makes testing the wind, except lower and worse, with something underneath it that was almost, God help me, almost like a word trying to happen and not quite managing it. And then the rungs began to groan. Once, twice, down into the dark with me, and every groan of that ladder was a hammer strike against the inside of my skull. I'm going to try to tell you this next part in a way that makes sense, that has a shape to it, beginning and middle and end, but the truth is, it didn't happen that way. It happened in pieces, in long stretches of nothing broken up by moments so sharp and so terrible that they stayed lodged in me whole, undamaged by time, while everything around them has gone soft and uncertain. So please forgive me if I make any inaccuracies. This was the most terrifying night of my entire life. First, there was the sound of it reaching the corridor floor. A wet, heavy settling, bone shifting and cracking under a weight I still cannot make myself picture, even hold now. And then, worse than the footsteps, worse than anything that came before it, the clicking. Small, dry, regular as a clock, coming from somewhere up near where that face was, a rapid little ticking sound like a woman's fingernail tapping glass. Except it never really stopped, never settled into any rhythm a person could predict, speeding up and slowing down in a way that made the hair stand up along my arms because I understood, somewhere down under the panic, that it was listening to itself. It was throwing that sound out into the dark and reading whatever came bouncing back to it. The way I saw bats do on nature shows Dad used to watch on Sunday afternoons. Except there was nothing small or harmless about the thing making it hear. And every time that clicking picked up its pace, I felt it, like a hand closing soft around my throat. Because I knew it meant the thing had found something in that dark worth listening closer to. It might be a fallen bone. Might be a draft coming down off the shaft. It might be me. I did not know that first hour whether it knew I was there at all. That not knowing was its own particular hell. I stood dead still with my back against that wall of bone, feeling the cold press of 100 years of dead things through my jacket, and I made myself breathe through my nose, slow, shallow, counting it out the way my dad used to count out load times before a shot. 1001, 1002. Anything to keep from gasping, and the clicking would swing right past me. It would come close, closer, and then swing away again like a searchlight passing over without quite catching. And each time it passed, I felt something in my chest unclench half an inch and then lock right back up the moment it swung back around. I started moving somewhere in that first hour. Had to. My legs had gone to pins and needles standing locked that way, and every few minutes a muscle in my calf would seize up hard enough to make my eyes water. And I understand that standing frozen forever wasn't a plan, it was just a slower way of losing. So I moved. An inch. 2 inches. Feeling the bone wall with my fingertips to keep my bearings in a dark so total I couldn't see my own hand an inch off my face. Working my way back down that corridor toward where I'd left the shotgun. Then every single motion I made between one sweep of that clicking and the next, holding dead still the second the rhythm changed, sometimes for a full minute or more with my foot half lifted and my whole body trembling from the effort of not finishing the step. It moved too. That's what I haven't found a way to make anybody understand who wasn't down there with me. It wasn't blundering around in the dark the way you expect an animal to, even a big one, even a smart one. It hunted the way something hunts that has never once in its whole existence needed its eyes, head swinging on that too long neck, that clicking, sharpening every time it turned my direction. And every so often it would go dead silent. No clicking, no footfall, nothing. And I would go dead silent right along with it, both of us standing still in that black corridor, not 20 feet apart from each other, listening to each other not move. And those were the worst moments of the entire night. Worse than the sounds, the listening, knowing something was standing in the dark close enough to touch, patient in a way nothing wild has any business being patient, waiting to hear me make the one mistake that would end it all. The first time I was sure it had found me, I felt more than heard it. A change in the air, a displacement, something enormous shifting weight not 4 feet off. And then a hand. I want to call it a hand, though I never saw it, only felt the air move and heard fingers drag along the bone wall not 3 feet from my face. So close I felt the draft of it stir the hair at my temple. And I bit down on the inside of my own cheek so hard that I tasted blood rather than making a single sound. It passed on, clicking, swinging off toward the far wall. I stood there afterwards shaking so hard my teeth chattered, silent chattering, jaw clenched near to a cracking to keep even that small sound locked inside my skull. And I understood for the first time in my life what people mean when they say somebody's blood ran cold, because mine did. I felt it. It was a physical thing moving down through my chest and out into my arms like ice water let loose in my veins. The second time was worse. That made it maybe halfway back down that wall, closer to the gun than I'd been all night. Moving so slow it hardly counted as moving at all, when my boot came down on something that gave under my weight with a sound. Small, brittle. The dry stick snap and that silence went off like a rifle shot, and the clicking stopped dead. Every single second in that corridor stopped, including, I am fairly sure, my own heart for one long, endless second. And then it came. Not the clicking. A breath. One long, wet, considering breath drawn in through whatever passed for that thing's nose. Close. So close I could smell it now on top of the general rot of the place. A hot, sour animal smell with something underneath that was almost sweet. Almost like rotten fruit. And I felt every hair on my body lift at once because I understood it had a location on me now. A direction, a distance, and it was deciding. I didn't breathe for what felt like a full minute. I have never in my life wanted so badly to scream out loud, and known so completely that screaming was the one thing standing between staying alive and being dead. My eyes had long since given up trying to see anything in that dark, and so instead they started giving me things that weren't there. Gray smears and drifting shapes swimming up out of the nothing the way your eyes will do even when they've been starved of light too long. And every one of those phantom shapes made my heart lurch sick and hard before I could remind myself silently that none of it was real, that the only real thing in that corridor was the actual weight of it standing somewhere close in the true dark, deciding whether the sound I'd made was worth the trouble. It moved on. I have no explanation for why, then or now, except that maybe whatever hunts by sound the way that thing did needs the sound to keep happening, needs a second data point to be sure, and I had gone stone silent quick enough that I became, for a little while longer, just one more piece of the general quiet. The third time, there was no mistaking it, and no slow build to it either. I had nearly reached my gun. My fingers were maybe 4 feet from where I remembered setting it down, my whole body screaming with the effort of covering that last stretch slow enough not to make a sound, when the clicking that had gone soft and distant for the last several minutes suddenly snapped fast, faster than I'd heard it go all night, a stuttering machine gun rattle of sound, and underneath it, rising, that same low note I'd heard 3 years before at the top of that well. The sound like the ground itself, deciding to hate you, and I understood it with a clarity that felt almost peaceful, almost calm in the worst way a mind can be calm, that the game, whatever that game was up until then, was over, that it knew exactly where I was, that it was coming. I don't remember deciding to move. I remember being still, and then I remember running, flat blind sprint down a corridor I couldn't see, one hand trailing the bone wall to keep me from slamming face first into raw earth, boots skidding on a floor that shifted and gave way under every stride, breath tearing in and out of me in ragged, sawing gasps. I no longer had the will or the wherewithal to keep quiet, because quiet didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered now but ground covered. And behind me, closing, close enough that I swear I felt the wind of it, that same low sound rising into something with edges to it, something that wanted to be a word and came out instead as a shriek that seemed to come from every direction of that corridor at once, off the bone walls, off the earth ceiling, until I couldn't have told you which way it really was coming from, even if my life had depended on picking right, which it did in that moment. My hand closed on the shotgun stock, and I do not think in my whole life I've ever been that grateful for the shape of a piece of wood and steel. I spun and I clicked the flashlight on with my thumb at the same instant I brought the gun up, and the beam caught it maybe 8 feet off, closing that last gap fast, low and coiled and impossibly wide across the shoulders in that tight corridor. That ruined dog's body, moving on legs bent all wrong for running upright the way it was running, and above it that face, that terrible, pinched, hairless face, turned full into my light for the first time all night. Mouth open on a jaw hinge too wide, too many teeth crowded in too small a space. Those thin membrane ears flattened back hard against the skull now. And the eyes, not eyes, those flat yellow-green coals, fixed dead on me with something in them that was not animal hunger alone. Something that looked, for one unbearable half-second, almost like recognition. I did not aim so much as I pointed and pulled, both barrels worth of thinking crammed into a half a second, and the shotgun went off on that low corridor with a sound that felt like the whole earth flinched. And I felt the recoil slam my shoulder, and I'm certain of this, certain in a way I've never doubted, I felt the buckshot connect. It shrieked. The sound that peeled the last of my nerve clean off the bone and sent me stumbling backwards toward the shaft even as I racked another shell into the chamber with hands I didn't feel like mine anymore. It fell back. Didn't fall down, but back, into the dark of the corridor, and I did not wait around to find out whether it was a retreat or just recoil from the shock of getting hit. I hit that ladder running, shotgun slung wild across my back, climbing 3 rungs at a time, and I heard it behind me. Coming again, coming fast now. All pretense of stalking was gone, and I heard the 2 lowest rungs give way under something's weight, with a crack loud as the shotgun blast that had just gone off. And I don't know to this day if that was luck, or God, or just old iron finally giving up at the one moment in 100 years it mattered most. I turned at the top, half out of that shaft already, and I fired one more time straight down into the dark, blind. Not aiming at anything I could see, just putting lead into the space where the sound was coming from. And I heard metal shear, and I heard that shriek again, further down this time, and I didn't stay to see what either shot had done. I hauled myself the rest of the way out of that well, and I ran. I ran the whole half-mile back to camp without once looking behind me, which I understand now was either the bravest or stupidest thing I'd ever done that whole night. I don't fully know which. I broke camp in the dark with my hands shaking so bad I couldn't work the tent poles right. Gave up halfway through and just threw the whole mess, tent and poles and all, into the truck bed loose. And I was on the county road doing 60 in a stretch posted for 35 before the sky had even started to gray up in the east. I never got that watch. It still sits with me some nights, worse almost than the rest of the story. That I got that close, 10 steps, 30 yards, whatever you want to call the distance between a man and the last thing his father ever touched. And I left it lying down there in the dark with everything else that place had swallowed over 100 years. I've told myself since that it likely wasn't his at all. That grief will make a man see gold in anything that catches a light long enough. I have never once managed to make myself believe that story all the way, though. I told myself driving out that I had done it, that the ladder was broken, that I hit it twice with buckshot at close range, that whatever lived down in that well was hurt bad enough or trapped long enough that it would be a long, long while, if ever, before it climbed back out of that ravine into the world I lived in. I told myself that all the way down the county road, and I believed it, or made myself believe it, right up until the eastern sky went from gray to the first thin line of pink, and I checked my mirror out of nothing but habit, the way you do on an empty road at that hour. And there was something back there, far back, at the very edge of where the headlights of a truck behind me should have been but weren't. No headlights at all. Just a shape, low and fast in the ditch line along the road, keeping pace, matching my speed exactly the way nothing on four legs should have been able to match a truck doing 60. And I looked at it for maybe 2 full seconds before I made myself look back at the road, hands locked wide on the wheel, foot flat to the floor the rest of the way to the highway. I don't know if it was really there. I've told myself both ways over the years, on the good days and the bad ones. But I know I have never, not once since that morning, driven that county road alone in the dark. I still go back, every April, same as always. Same water oak stand where I killed my first bird at 14. Same box call, though I carry the 870 with a different kind of respect for it now than I did as a boy. And some Aprils, I catch myself reaching for a watch pocket I don't have. An old habit my hands picked up somewhere along the way that my head hadn't caught up to yet. Uncle Bill's older now, grayer, less hair. Doesn't get out on the land much anymore. But he still tells me, every season, same as he told me when I was 16, stay off that back corner, Samuel. And I do, mostly. But some mornings, sitting against that same water oak with the fog low in the draws and a gobbler working somewhere out in the timber, I'll catch a smell in the wind that doesn't belong to anything living. Just a moment of it, there and gone, carried on some current of air working down out of that ravine 300 yards back through the trees. And I'll go still, the way I learned to go still, down in that corridor, and I'll wait it out. And it always passes. It always passes, so far.
Well, Samuel, if you're listening tonight, I appreciate you trusting us with that story. I don't rightly know what lived beneath Bellweather. Truth be told, I'm not sure I want to. Some places are old in ways that don't show up on a map. You don't improve them by digging deeper. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is leave them be. Now, I promised y'all earlier we'd go see what was making all that commotion up on the roof. Suppose a promise is a promise. Let me grab my flashlight here. Still works. That's encouraging. Now, this old staircase isn't exactly friendly on the knees, so bear with me a minute. Mercy. Bit cooler up here than I expected. We got a nice breeze tonight. You can probably hear the tower cables humming. They do that when the wind comes out of the west. Now, let's see what decided to land on my roof. Well, that's peculiar. Folks, I'm looking at... Lord, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Looks like eggs, about the size of a football, maybe a little bigger. Gray more than white, almost leathery, like old hide stretched tight. They're covered in mud, pine needles stuck all over them. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. They're all laid out in a rough circle. No nest, nothing holding them together, just sitting here. I don't reckon any bird around these parts lays eggs that big. Hang on. One of these shells is already open. Not broken. Opened, like something climbed out. Well now, where'd you wander off to? You folks hear that? Thought I imagined. No, that's real. Sounded like, almost like somebody tapping two little rocks together. Hold on. Let me look around here. Nothing by the tower. Nothing around the vent. Wait. There you are. Well, aren't you different? There's some kind of little critter over here, hiding behind the air conditioning unit. About maybe 2 feet tall. Hard to tell from where I'm standing. Big ears. Real big. Almost too big for its head. Looks like it's trying to stay tucked behind the unit. Only its eyes are peeking around the corner. Well, you're uglier than a mud fence, ain't you? Easy now. I ain't gonna bother you. Looks scared more than anything. Poor little. Folks, one of the eggs just split open. Another one. They're hatching. Every one of them. Good gracious. There's another little hand coming through the shell. Long fingers, tiny black claws. I think these are babies. Well, there's more than I thought. One's climbed up onto the antenna. Didn't even hear it move. Another one's... How'd you get over there so fast? They're looking at each other, clicking, like they're talking. Now hold on. Easy, easy now. I'm just gonna back toward this door, nice and slow. Y'all stay right where you are. Nobody needs to get excited. They're following me. Every time I take a step, they take one too. Still clicking. One of them just tilted its head, like it's trying to figure me out. Another one climbed upside down underneath the radio antenna. How are you? Folks, oh my lord. Every one of those little things just turned around. Oh lord. I'm gonna need everybody listening to stay real calm. Cause I don't believe... Whoa, hey, easy, no. Come on. Folks, I think we're gonna call it a night. I don't believe those things came here by themselves. Whatever dropped those eggs may still be up there. If you'll excuse me, I'm gonna leave the lights on tonight. Until next time, this is Jonah from WHAINT Radio. Good night, folks.
Rain was coming down like judgment on a road I know too well. Grandma warned me about the music that comes calling out of hell. Don't you chase no song through timber. Don't you answer when it's near. But the dial turned against my fingers, and a voice come through so clear. Oh, radio, where the holler never sleeps. A red light in the pine trees, a promise I can't keep. I followed what was singing, followed what I couldn't see. Now the tower's got my number, and the tower's got me. Found a road that don't exist there, gravel where there weren't one before. Coffee warm and no one in it, waiting at the station door. There's a name I didn't write down, curled in ink that looks like mine. Elias said, don't come looking. I came looking anyhow one time. Oh, ain't radio where the holler never sleeps. A red light in the pine trees, a promise I can't keep. I followed what was singing, followed what I couldn't see. Now the tower's got my number, and the tower's got me.
Archive entry 147 complete. Host deterioration progressing. Prepare replacement.